Hello, Planet LPers. Welcome to episode 123 of the podcast. I'm your host, Ted Asregadoo. Hi, how are you? Thanks for listening, viewing on YouTube, if you're looking at this particular video on YouTube. This episode is about Neneh Cherry. She is, in a way, one of the more influential voices of her generation, at least for a sliver of time. She wrote a memoir that was nominated for a Women's National Book Award in Britain. She didn't win, but she was nominated for this particular book called 1,000 Threads, a Memoir, which is very interesting about this. This is a book about a musician. The music is the least interesting part of it. Obviously, it is probably by design, but she did it in a way that vexed me in a way. I don't know if it, maybe not vexed, but kind of disappointed me. So we're going to talk about, or at least I'm going to talk about this book, and you're going to listen and watch. And just wanted to let you know that this episode, like many episodes of the Planet LP podcast, are sponsored by Steve Fox's Old School. 90s R&B and hip hop, also some classic soul thrown in there, all mixed expertly by Chef Steve Fox. It is right there for you 24/7 at stevefoxoldschool.com, stevefoxoldschool.com. You can hear it on TuneIn Radio or on online radio box, and that way you don't hear any commercials. In fact, it is commercial free. stevefoxoldschool.com. That's stevefoxoldschool.com. I always say it's a party in a box, and it is, or maybe the soundtrack to your day. So here we are, episode 123, and I'm talking about a book, and I'm talking about books at a time when I just read an Atlantic article, an article in the magazine The Atlantic, saying how people really aren't reading anymore. They're listening to books, but they don't really read for pleasure. Yes, we are inundated with these smartphones and constantly scrolling to see what's what. So we do read. We just don't read in the way that we used to. The printed book, as it were. Well, folks, I'm so old as that I still use the printed book, or I still buy printed books, because I guess I like the physical feel of this in my hand versus having to hold this all day in my hand, which is my phone. It's just kind of nice to be immersed in whether it's a novel or a nonfiction book like this. So my wife's family is from Portland, Oregon, and we had gone up to visit. And there's a huge bookstore there called Powell's Books. It is massive. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 floors. They have, I've never seen a bookstore so well stocked. Now, if you're from the West Coast or you're from Oregon, you already know about Powell's. If you're from the East Coast or outside the United States, you don't know about Powell's. But I was perusing through, and this book caught my attention. It was Neneh Cherry's 1,000 Threads, a memoir. And I liked Neneh Cherry's music a lot back in the day. And I'm talking about when she first came out in the late 80s. But I really jumped on her second LP, which was called Homebrew, that came out in the early 90s. Loved that album. So when I saw this memoir, I thought, I only know a little bit about her, mostly from some of the interviews she had done on MTV and other music related channels, and just in print and so forth, and just reading maybe on Rolling Stone or in the newspaper or whatnot. But I didn't know her story. I had no idea how she grew up in Sweden, and that her father was from Sierra Leone originally, but had met her mother, who was Swedish, a white Swedish woman, and they had her. And so she kind of comes up in these two worlds, that she's got her Sierra Leone family, she's got her Swedish family, and mixed into that, there's this American twist. Her mother, this really is a love letter to her mom. Her mom figures prominently in this book. She calls her mom Moki, and that's her nickname. Her real name is Monica Carlson. Monica Carlson fell in love with Neneh's father, Amadou Jah. They had her. They eventually broke up. And then she got together with jazz trumpeter Don Cherry. She looked at him as really her father figure, her dad. She really didn't really know Amadou until later in her life. And so she took the name Neneh Cherry, not Neneh Carlson or Neneh Ja, which was the last name of Amadou. It's a fascinating read in that this book, if you want to learn about what it's like to grow up in sort of two worlds and have to navigate that, be sort of the, you know, the exotic in Sweden, where she speaks without an accent, perfect Swedish. She grew up mostly in Sweden, and then, but always felt like an outsider, obviously because of the color of her skin and her name, Nana. So uh, that figures prominently. It's not to say that she was always the outsider, it's just that she hadn't quite found her thing then. When I read the book, I thought, well, I'm going to find out a lot about these records, especially the ones that meant a lot to me. Nope, I did not. In fact, this is one of my biggest gripes about this book, which is really interesting at times. Like I'm saying, I mean, she's sketching a life of what it's like to live in different worlds and to try to find your identity and navigating that, even through when she lived in London and intersected with some bands that I absolutely adore. She was a co-vocalist on The's second album. She did Slow Train to Dawn. And then she worked with the folks from Massive Attack. She knew these guys intimately. So, I mean, it's like, wow, this is like a who's who of London music from the 80s and 90s of the stuff that I absolutely adored. I thought this was going to be a bigger part of the story, but no. This is a story about family. It's about her finding her identity, her absolute, I would say her first love. This is about the fact that she was so much wedded to her mother, meaning that she just thought the world of her mother. So it's a daughter's love of her mother that just shines through the prose. I can see that Moki was this sort of trailblazer, and it's easy to see how she could be just enamored of her mom because her mom really lived an unconventional life, was an artist, lived with Don Cherry. They had this sort of bohemian lifestyle where they had they bought like a storefront or a schoolhouse actually, and it became sort of an artist's colony in a way. And she herself, her mother, worked as an artist right up until she died of cancer. Don Cherry was very much a figure in her life to the point where his view of the way in which the world operated in terms of music, in terms of culture, really influenced her. And so they kind of set the table for her to say, you know what, just go your own way, do your own thing, and be yourself. And she did. She came on the scene in the late 80s with such bravado and just such an attitude that was really refreshing at the time. If you ever just watch, I mean, you can watch the video for Buffalo Stance, which was really her biggest hit, and think, well, that's pretty good. But I want you to, and I'll put a little portion of the clip from the Top of the Pops, which is a British um, music show where she performs. And granted, it's not live, they mime to the songs, but she's performing Buffalo Stance and she's 8 months pregnant with her first child. And I thought that's pretty cool. I mean, it takes a lot, right? She's out there really promoting the song. Those moments in the book are so short lived that every time she talks about it, I'm like, I want more. I want more of this. That's why this book kind of, if I were to give it a grade, I would say, well, yes, it's kind of a B minus for me. Now, for those who like a very rich story about family, about identity, about navigating just life in general, and certainly her life is not uninteresting. She had a lot that she had to struggle with throughout her life. She's still alive, of course. She's 62 years old as of this recording. But she talks about being raped in London, and it was harrowing what happened. But she also ran into her rapist in the neighborhood that she eventually moved to. And I thought, oh, this guy's going to get it. I mean, she's going to get some guys to go beat the crap out of this guy. Didn't happen. She never revisited that part. Like, what happened? Did she go to the cops? Did she? I don't know. It doesn't sound like it. So it was little things like that. Like she set up this sort of arc of her life. And I thought, oh, it's going to resolve in a certain way, thinking I'm going to be told how it's going to be resolved. and it's not. So that was kind of a disappointment. But really, it was that second album, Homebrew, that meant so much to me. I listened to that record so much during that time when it came out and just found it to be, um, I guess, a breath of fresh air. An artist who was showing that she could grow from kind of this, gigolo sucker with Buffalo stance. So, like I said, Homebrew is my personal favorite. But what gets short shrift is if you know this record, you know that it has a duet with Michael Stipe from R.E.M. The song is called Trout, and it's pretty good. It's mostly about sex education. And I thought, oh, wow, she's going to go into how she wrote this song with Michael Stipe and all of this. I'm like, nope. Let me turn to page 218 where she mentions Michael Stipe and the making of this song. You'll find this to be somewhat humorous and shows my disappointment. We also worked with Michael Stipe on a song called Trout. We remain really close friends. Case closed. That's it. I'm like, what? Come on, man. As my friend John Young always used to say, or it still says nowadays. And then there's a part that I knew back in the 90s that the song Buddy X, which was one of her, what I think was the single off that record, or at least one of the singles off that record that did really well. It had a video I saw on MTV quite a bit. There was a rumor, if you will, that this song was really a critique of Lenny Kravitz, that he used to use the name Buddy X to check into hotels when he was on tour. Well, Neneh Cherry was on tour with him, and she saw that he was stepping out on his then wife, Lisa Bonet, with other women. So she writes the song as a critique of Lenny Kravitz. So I don't know if it's lore or if it's real because she never addresses that in this book. So I think overall, I'm going to circle back to something that I said before, that this book is about identity. It's about family, and the discography, all the music that she's created throughout her life or her adult life. That was sort of scaffolding, right? It was just something that was there. I wanted her to go into it more. She really didn't do it. So this is a common pitfall of a lot of memoirs, that the artists tend to skip the textbook chapters about their careers because probably they've told this story a zillion times to interviewers, whether it's a paper or a magazine or TV or the internet or whatever. And they're just like, I'm so sick and tired of talking about this music. But what they really want to talk about is XYZ. So this ends up in memoirs. And the XYZ for Neneh Cherry is her family. It's not only her mother, it's not only her growing up, her family in Sierra Leone and Sweden, but her own children, her own problems with mental breakdown. She had a couple of mental breakdowns at times, and she only sketches that too. I think she may have been had to go into a hospital to get better, but she doesn't talk about what caused this breakdown so much as I thought it may have been the death of her mother, but it could have been other things. It's unclear. And so that's why I feel like this book is more of a B minus than anything else. I think some listeners or some readers, some listeners of Neneh Cherry's music and some readers of this book may really like that family first approach. They may think that, yes, this is who she is, and this is the most important part. And quite frankly, it's the more interesting part. So B minus for me, probably A for those who love family memoirs. It is a book about identity, like I said, how it's to be, how it is to live in a society where you're not really thought of as accepted in either. It's not to say that when she went to Sierra Leone that they didn't quite accept her, but it was clear that she was not from Sierra Leone. And when she grew up in Sweden or lived in New York City or lived in London, that she never ever really felt absolutely connected to those cultures. She thought she found her tribe a couple of times with punk rock and with music and trying different things, clothing and glomming onto musical styles and so forth, just to try to find a sense of who she was. Did she find it? Yes. She finds it in her family. That's where she finds her sense of identity, in the love she has for her children, her partners that she's had throughout the years. That makes it a satisfying conclusion, personally, to the book. As the music guy, because I run a music podcast, here's where the B- is, of course, and I'll just reiterate, it is just the omission of so much that made her career that really disappointed me. And I wish she would talk more about that. Now, maybe I have to dig through archives of material to read about her opinion of what she created back in the day by going back to those sources that were written or filed back in the day. But I'm not about to do that. I was hoping that this book would essentially answer some of those questions, but it didn't. But I would say it's a medium-sized complaint that I've got with the book. And now, is it stopping me from recommending it? No, I've just spent a better part of almost 20 minutes talking about this book. So no, of course not. I think it is absolutely worth reading. It's an interesting read. It does suffer from what a lot of these memoirs suffer from. And that is, I can tell that she is being recorded. People are asking her questions, whether it's an editor or whether it's a ghostwriter, and she's just talking. And that gets transcribed into the chapters. Another memoir I really was hoping more from was the Chrissie Hynde one. And as I was reading that, I'm all like, it sounds like I'm reading a transcript of a recording. And I think very much that was the case for Chrissie Hynde's book, and maybe a little bit for Neneh Cherry's book. And I would hope that more artists, when they write their memoirs, will sit down with a real writer and tell their story and let the writer craft the tale, instead of just saying, here's the microphone, tell me what happened when you made Raw Like Sushi or Homebrew, and then just let it all pour out and then just put it right on the page. I don't think it works well that way. I think it works better when you have a really good writer that works with the artist and crafts a very compelling narrative, that is. Maybe people have more than one narrative. So let me leave you with this. If you were writing your own memoir, would you rather dig into your biggest professional achievement or the relationships that shaped who you are? Can a book do both really well? So those are my questions as I wrap up this episode, which is a short one. And think about that. If you have any comments, just leave them on planetlp.com. There is a comment section on the website. You can also leave them on our social media. We're only on two, which is Facebook and Instagram. Look us up at The Planet LP or Planet LP on Facebook. Okay, so The Planet LP on Instagram. So that's all my little plug for social media. All right, folks, until next time, be well. Thanks for tuning in and for listening in. And I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Planet LP podcast right here. See you soon. Bye.